So I want to talk about some fundamental problems in representation theory that arise in geometric complexity theory program, GCT program, towards the P versus NP problem. Now, I am really not going to get into complexity theory, P versus NP problem, or even the GCT program, but just focus more on the math side, just the representation theory side, and just point out some conjectures which encompass and go far beyond the classical plathism problems in representation theory. So let's start by fundamental problem in representation theory. Called no chalk is fine. Okay, the problem we'll call it subgroup restriction problem. So I don't know exactly what has been done in this course. So let G be a connected reductive group. So in case this has not been done in the course, let me just say in few words what a connected reductive group is. So we say that the group is reductive. So we say that the group is reductive. It simply means that every finite dimensional representation of the group can be written as a direct sum of irreducible representations. And we are assuming that the characteristic is 0. Yeah, in this talk, we are going to assume characteristic 0. So there are many definitions of reductivity, but this is the simplest one. Every finite dimensional representation of that group can be written as a direct sum of irreducible representations. So for example, if W is some representations, you can split it as the direct sum of irreducible representations Wi, where Mi denotes the multiplicity of that representation. Okay, so this is the multiplicity of that representation. So every finite dimensional representation can be then broken into pieces, and those pieces, the building blocks, are the irreducible representation. So one good example of reductive group is just GLNC. So this is the classical result of Weil, who showed that every finite dimensional representation of GLNC can be written as a direct sum, and this he also classified all these irreducible representations, and those irreducible representations of GLNC, irreducible representations, finite dimensions, these are called Weil modules, and they are in one-to-one correspondence with partitions lambda. So these are called partitions. So by a partition here is just non-decreasing integral sequence of length at most n. So corresponding to every such partition, there is a Weil module which we denote as, if this is G, V lambda G. Okay. So there is one-to-one correspondence between a set of such integral sequences, partitions, and corresponding to that there is an irreducible representation called Weil module, and this, I suppose, in the course of, in the terminology of course, correspond to dominant weight also, interpreted appropriately. So now coming back to the subgroup restriction problem. So the problem is the following. So say H is some connected reductive group, and then there are many others reductive groups also, but if we want, we can just restrict ourselves to GLNC. H is some connected reductive group which is a small we say, and is both are connected reductive, but this is a subgroup of that. Okay, so this could be GLNC and this could be small GLMC embedded in it in some way. Okay. So now, while of course classified the irreducible representation, that building blocks of all the reductive, connected reductive groups. Okay, that is one of his classical achievements. And one of the reasons for classifying these building blocks is that if you are given a big representation, how does it actually break into the pieces? So this is actually the problem of representation theory in some sense. This is what one wants to understand. And though the building blocks were classified long ago, the purpose for which the building blocks were classified, this is the purpose, this still remains open. This is one of the central open problem of representation theory. So the problem is, so if you are given H is a subgroup of G, so let us take V lambda G, okay, and so let's call this rho. So because H is reductive, so via this homomorphism you can think of this as an H module also. Yeah. So how does it decompose as an H module? As H module, how will this decompose? So this would be, because of reductivity, we know that it would break up into irreducible pieces of H. So it would be something like A pi lambda rho, some multiplicities. It will break into irreducible representation. So since the building blocks of H are V pi H, okay. So and this would be the multiplicity of that representation in this. So this lambda corresponds to this. This rho specifies this, and pi is multiplicity of this. So these are called Plaithism constants, generalized Plaithism constants. And this need not be GLNs, it could be arbitrary connected reductive groups. So the problem is the following. So given any irreducible representation of G, now we want to know how it splits as representation of H. So the problem is the following, the subgroup restriction problem is the following problem. First, give a good formula. So we have to say what good means. So we will specify later for these multiplicities for Plaithism constants A pi lambda rho. Okay. So what do we mean by good? Yeah. So of course, what mathematicians say by good. So since now Weil also gave a general, I don't know if it was done in this course, Weil character formula, using which you can actually get some formula for this. Yeah. So if it was done in the course, but that formula is not good. Why is that? If you thought it looks beautiful, that is not what good means. Okay, I mean it can look beautiful, but it could be horrible, and it is actually horrible. Yeah. Why is that? Huh? Yeah. Can somebody tell why that formula was not good? Yeah, so because of the alternating signs. Okay, so there is a lot of cancellation in it. So the first thing is you want positive. Yeah, but just positive is not enough. That there should be no cancellation, but it should have some complexity theoretic properties also. We'll see later what that means, but it should be belong to what is in complexity theory, say complexity class sharp P. So if you know what complexity theory is, fine, otherwise later we will come to that. Yeah. So it should not be just, it should be efficient to compute. That is what this sharp P means in complexity theory. Yeah. Then second is give a good procedure for deciding if A pi lambda rho is positive. Again, Weil character formula is bad because there are a lot of cancellation, so it's very hard to know. But even if you have a good formula like that, that doesn't give you a good procedure, because if you want to compute a Sharpe formula, it still take exponential time. Like permanent is a Sharpe function, but to decide if the permanent of a non-negative matrix is positive, there is a polynomial time algorithm for that. That is just perfect matching algorithm. So you want some good. So by good, from complexity theory will mean polynomial. Later on we'll say in exactly what that polynomial time computable means. Okay. So of course this is not what how the problem was specified classically, okay, because classically in Weil's days, of course even Weil was interested in this, but Weil himself did not know what Sharpe is and what polynomial is that time. So that was just intuitive, but in the GCT program, I mean, these things are given very specific meaning. So by good, we just don't mean good, you know, feel good, but polynomial time algorithm and Sharpe formula. Yeah. So if this is solved, then this is the problem of representation theory. Then we can say that we understand representation theory. Right now we know the bricks, but we don't understand the buildings. I mean, that is the state of affairs in representation theory. And this is actually the basic problem of representation theory, and we don't understand. I mean, at this point it's fair to say that we really understand very little of representation theory, because the main problem is still very much out of our reach, and so this problem is what arises in the GCT program. And so we are going to give the story of this problem in this lecture. So there are some special cases of this problem, so let us just specify those. So the first special case is the standard plathism problem. Standard plathism. So in the standard plathism problem, what we have is that H is just GLNC, and that is embedded in. So if H is GLNC, so if you take some V mu of H, some irreducible representation of H, yeah. So since V mu of H is an irreducible representation, it means that since this is a representation of H, it means that there is a homomorphism of H to GL of V mu of H, correct? This is the representation map, yeah. So let's call this G. So let's take this to be that row, okay. So just the homomorphism corresponding to the representation map of H into GL of V pi of mu of H. So, and this is also some partition, and then of course V lambda G then as H module would split as A pi lambda mu. So instead of rho I am writing this mu, because this mu specifies this completely, yeah, times V pi of H. So this is how it would split as an H module. So these are the standard plathism constants. And the standard, so the classical plathism problem was give a good formula for plathism constants, okay, but good without the classical representation theory just said good means mathematically good means positive, but just that is not enough. We have to specify, yeah. Oh, is that so? Okay. Yeah, so the classical plathism problem just asks for a good formula for this, but without specifying exactly what good meant. So positivity is one part of it, but we'll also specify exact in what sense it ought to be in Sharpe later on, okay, because it's lightly settled problem. So that is one standard, one special case of that subgroup restriction problem. The second is this, okay, yeah, Kronecker problem. So in the Kronecker problem, what you have is H is GLNC times GLNC, and it is embedded inside G equal to GLC Cn tensor Cn. Okay. So this GLNC factor acts on this Cn and that GLNC factor acts on this Cn. So this is just the natural embedding, okay, which is equal to GLN square. So just take the natural embedding of H equal to GLNC cross GLNC inside GLN square C, and then again you will have that if you take any V lambda of G, that would break as, so all the irreducible representations of H are now the tensor products of Weil modules, right? So that would split as K lambda alpha beta. It will break as like this: V alpha GLN C tensor V beta GLN C. Okay, that is how V lambda G would break as. So these are then called Kronecker coefficients. And the third case, and so both these cases are very hard, we do not understand them really at today. This third case which we understand very well actually, and this is in some sense a toy case of this, but this toy case is the only one which we really understand, and this is called the Littlewood-Richardson coefficients. And what this is, here H is GLNC embedded inside H cross H by diagonal map. Okay, so diagonal meaning any element H here goes to H cross H. Yes. This is G now. So if you take any irreducible representation of G, so that would be of the point V alpha of G tensor V beta of G, V alpha of H. Yes. If you take any irreducible representation of G, that will be tensor product of irreducible representations of H. So then this would break as C alpha beta lambda V lambda of H, right, as an H module. These are called Littlewood-Richardson coefficients. Okay. So these are the, so in all these cases the formula problem is the same. Give a good formula for those coefficients, give a good procedure for deciding if the coefficient is non-vanishing. Positive means non-vanishing, because all these coefficients are non-negative anyway, is positive or non-vanishing.
So is the Littlewood-Richardson rule a good formula?
Yes. From a complexity theory point of view also, yeah. And whenever mathematicians said we want a good formula like for Plathism constant, they intuitively meant like Littlewood-Richardson coefficient formula, okay. But that was just intuitive. The real meaning is actually it should be Sharpe formula. In a precise sense, we will state later. So this is the only case in which both these problems are well solved. Okay, so we'll start with that first. So I will now erase this. Everybody knows this. So let us start with the first case. So Littlewood-Richardson coefficients, we'll just call them LR coefficients. So let's begin with LR story. Okay. Okay, so the story for the Littlewood-Richardson coefficient. So the first formula is a good formula. So the first problem is good formula, and that is known. So, and that good formula is Littlewood-Richardson rule. So everybody probably knows this. This was done in the course. No?
Only SL2.
Huh?
Only SL2 was done.
Okay, but I will just. So the classical Littlewood-Richardson rule, actually, what it says in complexity theory lingo now is that this belongs to the complexity class char P. So I will state in a moment what it means. So like if you take the Weil character formula for C alpha beta lambda, okay, why it is bad from a complexity perspective is that if you look at just the Weil character formula and you try to evaluate it in a usual way, the algorithm would be p-space algorithm. It would work in polynomial space, but it will take huge amount of time exponential. But char P is much more efficient than p-space. Okay, so from a complexity theoretic perspective, what Littlewood-Richardson did was it took the classical formula, which was p-space formula, and instead of that gave us char P formula. Okay, so what is char P? So char P is the counting class associated with NP. So you say that a function is in char P if it counts the number of solution of a problem in NP. Everybody knows NP here? NP? No? A problem is in NP if the solution can be verified in polynomial time. Okay? So for example, knowing if the graph has an Hamiltonian circuit, okay, a circuit that visits every vertex exactly 1. So given a circuit, you can easily verify whether it is really a Hamiltonian circuit or not in polynomial time, in fact even in linear time. So this is a typical formula that is in NP. The problem is in P if the solution can be found in polynomial time. It is in NP if the solution can be, given solution can be verified in polynomial time. And by char P, we say some function is in char P if it counts the number of solution of a problem in NP. Okay. So like for example, number of Hamiltonian circuits in a given graph, okay, that is a typical char P function. So this is number of solutions of a problem in NP. Okay. That is what we mean by function is in char P. This is a counting class.
So how is it? Is it bigger than?
It is bigger than NP. It's more difficult because NP just tells you whether that function is non-vanishing.
Definitely bigger than NP.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, well, NP is a decision problem and this is a counting problem, but it's harder than, yeah, NP. Yeah. Not definitely. I mean, that is what our complexity theory is. I mean, we don't know anything for sure. We don't even know whether P is definitely bigger than NP or not. I mean, that is what the whole program is about. Yeah. But we think that it is bigger than NP. Yeah. So what Littlewood-Richardson showed that C alpha beta lambda belongs to char P, because what Littlewood-Richardson rule says C alpha beta lambda is equal to the summation. You can write it as so let's call this S alpha beta lambda. So this is the set of LR tableau. So there are certain tableaus of shape alpha beta slash lambda. So what set of LR tableau of shape lambda slash alpha with content beta. So this is just the number of LR tableau of shape. So what is meant by that is you take so each lambda is a partition, so corresponding to that there is a diagram called Young diagram which has lambda I boxes in the ith row. Okay. So you take the Young diagram corresponding to lambda, you take the Young diagram corresponding to alpha, and we assume that it is smaller than lambda. So let's say something like that. So this is alpha inside lambda. And by LR tableau we mean and you then put here the numbers like 1, 2, 3, etc. Okay, so you just take the numbering of this remaining shape by the numbers were taken from the range 1 to n, where n is this n, and those numbers, those sequences have to satisfy certain linear inequalities. Okay, and all those given a tableau, whether those inequalities are all satisfied can be just verified in linear time, in fact, or quadratic time. So, given a tableau, whether it is an LR tableau, you can verify in polynomial time. Okay, so that is why this is a Sharpe formula. Okay, because the verification, so it is the number of solutions of a problem in NP, and the problem in NP, yeah. So basically, it means that each solution you should be able to verify in polynomial time. So whether T belongs to S alpha beta lambda, this problem belongs to P. Okay, so because of that, this is actually a Sharpe formula. So this is the Littlewood-Richardson rule. So that solves the first problem satisfactorily, because it expresses the Littlewood-Richardson coefficient as a number of Littlewood-Richardson tableau. Yeah, so it gives an explicit combinatorial formula, and each term here T, this problem can be solved in polynomial time. And by polynomial time we mean this belongs to P, it means that it can be solved in polynomial in the bit lengths of alpha, beta and lambda. So alpha is given by, excuse me? Excuse me? You can't compute the formula in polynomial time. Each term, whether that term is correct or not, you can verify in polynomial time. That is what a Sharpe formula means. Okay. So whether this tableau belongs to this. Okay, so you go over all the tableaux. So the membership problem, whether tableau is really in Littlewood-Richardson tableau, you can do it in time that is polynomial in the bit lengths of alpha, beta and lambda time. Each of these is a partition, right? So the partition is given by alpha is alpha 1 greater than etc. up to alpha n. So its bit length is the bit length of the binary specifications of this, right? So it's log 2 of alpha 1 to plus etc. plus log 2 of alpha n. That is the bit length of alpha, bit length of beta, bit length of delta. So whether a given partition is a LR tableau of shape lambda slash alpha with content B can be verified in time that is in fact linear in the bit lengths. Yeah, that is easy. So
sorry, doesn't that define it to be in NP?
Excuse me?
Does not this define it to be in NP?
Which?
Verify a solution in polynomial.
Yeah, but you have to, and that C alpha beta is the number of such solutions, right? So that is Sharpe. Okay. So that solves the first formula. Can I rub this now? Yeah. Huh.
Whenever it is convenient for you,
Yeah.
you can take a 15-minute break and chat.
Yeah, yeah.
Whenever it is convenient.
Yeah. We just we just half. Yeah, I will start for 15 more minutes and then.
Yes, that would be
Now the next thing is you want to know if yeah. So that gives a good formula for Littlewood-Richardson, but that doesn't tell you, give a good algorithm for verifying if C alpha beta lambda is non-zero or not. Yeah, because to actually, if you want to compute this formula, it is Sharpe, that is very complicated. Yeah, it will take exponential time. So one of the results in GCT3, there is a series of papers on GCT you will find on. So this is with Harinarayan and Milind Soni, and also independently by Knudsen and Tao, is that the problem of deciding of deciding if C alpha beta lambda is non-zero, that is positive, belongs to P. What that means is can be solved in polynomial, in time that is polynomial in the bit lengths of alpha, beta and lambda time. Okay. Yeah. So you can't just use this formula for sure, you need something more. So what more do you need? So, and the proof is easy. Proof is it finally comes down to the saturation theorem of Knudsen and Tau. Okay, so let's see how you can do this. So first of all, this LR rule can be written in a polyhedral form. So we'll call this polyhedral LR rule. So what it says is that there exists an explicit polytope for any alpha, beta and lambda, P alpha, beta, lambda, some explicit polytope P alpha. So we'll say in a moment what explicit means, such that C alpha, beta, lambda is the number of integer points in P alpha, beta, lambda. So this is number of integer points. Okay, and by explicit we mean the membership problem belongs to P. So whether given any point x, whether x belongs to P alpha, beta, lambda. So given any rational point x, whether that point belongs to this polytope can be verified in polynomial time, in bit lengths of x, bit lengths of alpha, bit length of beta and bit length of lambda time. Okay, so there exists such an explicit polytope for given alpha, beta and lambda, so that given any point x, whether x belongs to that polytope can be verified in polynomial time. And there are many such explicit polytope. One such polytope is constructed by Knudsen and Tau called Hive polytope. So it is a polyhedral form of that LR rule. Okay, so it just expresses Littlewood-Richardson coefficients as a number of integer points in an explicit polytope. Again, explicit, mathematicians just say explicit. So in mathematics, explicit is just a soft term. Okay, I mean something looks nice, but in complexity theory, I mean here in GCT, there is no soft term. Explicit has some meaning. Explicit means like the membership problem can be done in polynomial time. Okay, only then it may look as nice as, but complexity theories won't be impressed by that. I mean, Weil character formula to a complexity theory means nothing actually, because however beautiful it may be, because it is a p-space formula. Okay, so whereas in mathematics, Weil character formula you may say is explicit because every term has some explicit form and all that, but it is not explicit from this point. Yeah.
So you're saying that if you have an explicit polytope, then whether there is a lattice point in it or not is a polynomial problem.
No, that is not the case. No, that problem actually, given any explicit polytope, whether it has an integer point or not, is an integer programming problem.
But that is the problem you have to solve. Right?
Yes, but now for this polytope we can solve that in polynomial time because that polytope has some additional property.
It's not just that.
No, not just that. Because just that is an integer programming problem and it is NP complete. Whether a polytope, explicit polytope contains an integer point is the so-called integer programming problem, and it is known to be NP complete. So assuming P is not equal to NP, for general polytopes you can't do it in polynomial time. For this polytope you can do this in polynomial time. And why is that? Okay. So we need some additional properties so that this problem can be solved. So second problem is what is called polynomiality rule. Okay. So let us define this C alpha beta lambda k. This function is C of k alpha, k beta, k lambda. Okay. So you just trace these things by k. So partition k times alpha is you multiply each entry of alpha by k. Okay. So this is the same thing as the number of integer points inside P of k alpha, k beta, k lambda. Okay. Yeah. As it turns out, yeah. So what? And so this Resart, also Kirillov, and many others showed that this is actually a polynomial function. C alpha beta lambda is a polynomial in K. Okay.
What is the first name?
Resart. Resart is the name. And Kirillov. Yeah. So they showed that this function actually is polynomial. Yeah. And third is the saturation theorem. Yes, and the number of integer points n. So then there is a general theorem by Erhard which says that that is actually a quasi polynomial. That's the Erhard quasi polynomial. Result they showed that actually it's not just a quasi polynomial, it's a polynomial. Yeah, so this actually would be number of integer points in k times p alpha beta lambda. So by general theory you would know that it is a quasi polynomial. That is the general, is called the Erhard quasi polynomial. But they actually showed that it's a polynomial. And the saturation theorem of Knudsen and Tau. So I will define what a quasi polynomial is later. It means that it's there are some bunches of polynomials. So depending upon what the value of k is, it is values of one of those polynomials. So
Is it the same as polynomial on residue classes?
yes, something like that. Yeah, polynomial on residue classes. Yes. Now, so the saturation theorem says that this function C alpha beta lambda k is saturated. Okay. So it's saturated. So what this means is that, what this means is that if C alpha beta lambda k is non-zero for some integer k greater than or equal to 1, then actually it is non-zero for k equal to 1 itself. Okay. Then C alpha beta lambda 1 equal to C alpha beta lambda is non-zero. Okay. So that actually is the same thing as, so which basically means that if you take the polytope p alpha beta lambda and you stretch it by some k, okay, large enough k, if that contains an integer point, then the original polytope contains an integer point, which is the same thing as saying that C alpha beta lambda is non-zero if and only if p alpha beta lambda is non-empty. Okay. Now this is rarely the case. So basically what it says is that if that high polytope is non-empty, then it is guaranteed to contain an integer point. Okay. This is a remarkable property which general polytopes don't have, that the general polytope could be non-empty and still not contain any lattice point, whereas the high polytope has this property because of the saturation theorem, that if it is non-empty, it is guaranteed to have an integer point. So because of that, now it is easy. So the algorithm to decide, if C alpha beta lambda is non-zero is very easy. So to decide if C alpha beta lambda is non-zero, it suffices to check if P alpha beta lambda is non-empty, and since this is an explicit polytope, okay, this can be done in polynomial time by linear programming. This can be decided in polynomial time by LP, since P alpha beta lambda is non-empty. Okay, right? So because of that, the problem of deciding if the Littlewood Richardson coefficient is non-zero can be actually solved in polynomial time. Yeah.
You don't need it to have a open set, just non-empty.
Yeah, non-empty. That's it. If it is non-empty, it is guaranteed to have an integer point.
If you scale it with that,
Yeah.
and that theorem says it is saturated.
That is what saturation theorem tells you.
So I think this question is whether the polytope encloses a volume.
No.
Some small line, right, inside of
No. So actually, if you go through the whole thing, it is just suffices to check whether it is non, and I mean whether it is full dimensional or not. That is what you are saying. Yeah. All that can be done in polynomial time. So, okay. So this is now it's not exactly classical because saturation theorem and all this is fairly recent, but so there is one case of this subgroup restriction problem in which we can say we understand representation theory, and that is Littlewood Richardson coefficient. But the real problem is Plethism or Kronecker. Okay, so so the goal is and this would be the central problem of representation theory, is basically to lift this LR story to the Plethism constants. Okay, that is what the goal. Lift LR theory, LR story to Plethism constants. And this is one of the things, one of the central problems in geometric complexity theory. Basically, solve this for the general Plethism concept. And so I think we can take a break here, and then from here, then we'll say whatever we can say about this story in the next half. Yeah. So this actually is just a toy version of the real problem, and then we'll say what the real problem is and why this is so real. Yeah. Okay. So okay. So now the goal is to the goal now is to lift the LR story to the Plethism constants. So let A lambda pi mu, this is a Plethism constant. So remember the Plethism constant, we had defined it somewhere, but yeah. I think it was defined here. So this is G equal to G ln C, H equal to G ln C inside GL V mu H equal to G, then V lambda of G would break as over pi A pi lambda mu. So this is the standard Plethism constant. Okay. So the G would break as an H module into pieces, the multiplicities of the various pieces, the number of bricks of various kind. So, these are the Plathisian constant, where you embed H in the GL of its representation by the standard representation map. Okay. So, we define the bit length of specification of this as lambda mu pi, and this is defined to be bit length of lambda, bit length of mu plus bit length of pi. Actually, ideally it should have been just this, okay, but it is actually, it has to be for some technical more than that, minimum of dimension of v mu plus the total size of lambda. Okay. By total size you mean summation lambda I. Okay, so, we define the bit length of specification of lambda, mu and pi to be that, and the reason we define it like that is by Klimik's formula. So, there is a character formula which is more efficient than Weil character formula due to Klimik, which shows that with this definition of A lambda pi mu, A pi lambda mu belongs to the what called the complexity is called gap P. What that means, it can be written as the difference between two Sharpe formula, okay, Sharpe minus Sharpe, symbolically I am writing. So, what that means is the following. It means that you can write A pi lambda mu, you can write it in the following form, that it is summation over some combinatorial strings A such that the bit length of A is polynomial in this lambda that. Huh? Yes, so this bit length is log of summation of lambda x, but we have to also add this minimum of this. Okay. Dimension of v mu of h.
Comma, you mean comma there?
Huh?
Instead of plus, you mean comma?
Yeah. So, there will be some combinatorial strings of length this, and over that this is a 0 1 poly lambda mu pi computable function, some function of A, 0 1 function of A which is computable in that much time, poly this time, both of these and chi to A. So, it can be written as a difference of two functions, okay, both polynomial time computable and summation over all lambdas, all bit strings of this length. Okay. So, A varies over all bit strings of length this much, and chi 1 A is a polynomial time computable function of that.
What's the difference? The difference of two functions is a function, and if each function is polynomial, then
Yeah, it's a 0 1 function. So, it's a 0, and it is not negative, it never takes negative value. Okay. But we know that this is actually non-negative. Okay. Ideally speaking, we should have had just this. It can be written, if it could be written just as this would be Sharpe, correct? That is what it would mean. So, and so in fact that is the conjecture. So, it can be written as a difference of two Sharpe functions. Yeah. But the conjecture is in GCT 6. So, this is the main, so in the series of GCT paper this is and this is called Plathism FH. FH stands for some flip hypothesis. So, I will not go into why it is called flip hypothesis. It is this has something to do with the flip paradigm of GCT and so forth, but the conjecture is that corresponding to that problem A, it says that A pi lambda mu belongs to Sharpe. That is, it can be written as just like this, okay, just not as a difference, but and we know that this is non-negative. So, they should not have been without any alternating signs. it belongs to sharp P, that is the first conjecture. And 2, whether A pi lambda mu is non-zero can be decided in polynomial in bit lambda mu pi time. So, this is the precise form of the subgroup restriction problem, because that time we were just saying good, we did not say what good means. So, good now means that this belongs to sharp P in this sense, where the bit length is defined to be this, and whether it is non-zero can be decided in polynomial time. This is the conjecture. If this can be solved, then we can say that we can understand representation theory now from a complexity theory point of view. Otherwise, we just have building blocks, but we don't know what to do with those building blocks. That is the current state of representation theory. Yeah. So, what Klimik showed was that this can be written as a difference of two sharp P functions. He did not show that it is in sharp P, that is the hard. There are alternating signs. Okay. So, if it could be written as just this. Okay. So, over you take all bit strings of length lambda pi mu, and this is some zero.
So there is a polynomial in the.
It is not polynomial. This is some 0 1 computable this time computable function.
No, this A is equal to poly.
That says that the bit length of A
Is a certain
a polynomial is at most some polynomial in lambda mu and pi. Okay.
in that.
Here. Yeah. So, you take all bit lengths of at most polynomial bit length, and there are some polynomial time computable functions chi1 and chi2, non-negative 0 1 functions. Okay. So, is that this can be written as a difference of those two functions summed over all a's. So, what we really want is not have this cancellation is what we want to take out of. Okay. If we can take that out, then that would say that this is in sharp P. That is precisely what it says, that basically this cancellation can be removed. Okay. But removing that cancellation is precisely the hard part, right. So, this would then be the generalization of the Littlewood-Richardson rule in the Plaithism setting, and this is a pure statement, a complexity theoretic statement. I mean, in representation theory also they say we want a good formula like Littlewood-Richardson, but what is good, is not precisely specified, whereas this specifies it precisely, that it should be a sharp P formula in this precise sense. Okay. And then again we want a good algorithm for deciding if it is non-vanishing. So, just good is a soft term. So, this is a precise that this can be decided in polynomial time. Okay. This is the conjecture. And the reason this conjecture is supposed to be true is that GCT6 also gives an evidence. It gives an evidence that if you assume some hardness conjectures, some variants of P versus NP conjecture, the arithmetic variants of P versus NP conjecture, and plus some standard de-randomization conjectures in complexity theory, which I will not go into. Then these together, ideally we should have been able to show that they imply this Plaithism FH. That is not the case, but there is a good evidence that if these are true, then this Plaithism FH is also true. That there is an evidence which suggests that this Plaithism FH is actually, that conjecture is actually an implication of the hardness conjectures in complexity theory, such as P versus NP and the associate, though you may see no connection between that and the Plaithism constants and so forth. Okay.
If you prove this, you get a.
Huh?
If you disprove this, you get a result.
Yeah. So, I mean that is not a solid error, but it gives a good evidence that this well could be the implications, and that if the original conjectures are true, then this should be true. Yeah. This.
And if you don't add that extra term to the bit length, then this is false.
Then you don't expect it to be true. For example, because Klimik's formula, in the Klimik's formula, you do require it to be like that. Okay.
So even that is
Yeah, I mean, even here you can't do it in just bit length, purely that, without that addition. But in the Kronecker thing, there would be no such addition. This thing would be 0 for Kronecker coefficients. Okay. That is the thing. Would be polynomial, because this V mu pi is polynomial in this. Okay. For the So this is not an issue for Kronecker coefficients. It is just an issue for general.
But that can be a pretty large.
For general Platheism constant, but for Kronecker problem, it is not a large.
Sorry, can you explain that alien how to do it? The Platheism explain that.
Can I explain this? No, that is big story, long. Huh?
No, what you explained just now in South. So
Oh, so what it suggests is that if the P versus NP and related conjunctions in complexity theory are true, then that should be true. Otherwise, a priori, you don't see why this should be a polynomial time algorithm and so. It gives an evidence. The real evidence would have been that this is an implication of that. That can't be proven so far, but it gives some evidence that these could be implications of the hardness conjectures in complexity.
So when you say P versus NP hardness conjecture, you mean P equals NP is the
P naught,
P not equal to NP.
P not equal to NP.
P naught.
What time of what? Of arithmetic polynomial identity testing, de-randomization. Okay, so
That's a little counterintuitive, right?
it is counterintuitive.
Because there P not equal to NP you are saying, and here you are saying this will be in.
Yeah. So it is counterintuitive. So it says that if certain things in NP don't have fast algorithm, then these things would have fast algorithm. It's counterintuitive, right? Yeah, that is how it is. So yeah, so it turns, that is why it is called flip. It says that, if P is not equal to NP, if certain problems cannot be solved fast, then these problems can be solved fast.
Because some combination.
No, it is a highly non-intuitive thing, it is not at all obvious why, certain problems cannot be solved fast. And in fact, the whole flip philosophy of GCT program tries to show P not equal to NP and something by showing that problems of this kind can be actually put in P. Okay, to show that something cannot be done in P, the whole program is to show that some hard problems in algebraic geometry representation theory such as this are in P. Okay, so it turns the problem upside down to prove the non-efficiency result, to show that certain problems are inherently not efficient, you show that certain problems are actually efficient, and from that somehow you have to derive. So that is the terminology flip, but we won't go into that. Just this counterintuitive part, turning the things upside down. Yeah. Okay. So So how to prove the first thing, the Sharpe thing? So there is, in the GCT program there is some approach via non-standard quantum group. So which I am not going to go into this lecture, because that is another story by itself. But here we just want to say a few words about how to prove FH2, that is this part, a polynomial time algorithm for this, assuming this. Okay, FH2 assuming. So you remember that to get from Littlewood-Richardson rule an algorithm for deciding non-vanishing of Littlewood-Richardson coefficient, we required some saturation things, right, in addition. So we basically want to specify what the saturation properties are. So assuming this and some saturation properties, then you will be able to get, we would like to prove this. We will not exactly this, but some relaxed form of this, something like that. Yeah.
Could you give a reference for the first one and also say a few words about what you mean by non-standard?
Yeah. So I think it is just, so maybe I should just rub this out so that it is, it is an unnecessary distraction. So Yeah, so it is, yeah, so there
Just a
are,
reference.
no, not, so in the GCT series, so one reference I would just give GCT 4, okay, and there are some additional things, yeah. And non-standard means it's not like the standard Drinfeld-Jimbo quantum group, but some other non-standard deformation. So like using the Drinfeld-Jimbo quantum group, you can get Littlewood-Richardson coefficient, like, you know, Kashiwara's theory of crystal graphs and all that. So that doesn't work in this setting. So there is an attempt to actually live that theory in to this setting. So using some other non-standard quantum deformations. So how to prove this? So some things in GCT6 will give. So just like with Littlewood-Richardson coefficients, we associated the stretching function. So we associate stretching function here, a pi lambda mu k is a k times pi a times lambda for the same mu. Okay. Yeah. So it's just the stretching thing. So this mu doesn't change, because you remember that h is equal to GL and C. Inside G equal to GL V mu H. So this homomorphism map remains the same. This is what this mu fixes, okay. But what changes is this pi. So this V lambda G is summation pi a pi lambda mu V pi H. So you stretch this pi and this lambda, okay. So this is, so you get a polynomial function like this. And so the question is then, what can you say about this? And so the theorem GCT6 is that this pi lambda mu k is a quasi polynomial. Okay. So by quasi polynomials, what we mean? So we say that fk is a quasi polynomial if there exists polynomials, some set of polynomials f1k to flk, such that fk equal to fik if k equal to I mod L. So depending upon the residue class of k, you evaluate the appropriate polynomial at that k, and fk should be equal to that polynomial. So it's not one polynomial, but bunch of polynomials. Yeah. So what this says is that this is a quasi polynomial. So let me just sketch a proof based on the work of Bryan and Butow. So I don't know whether this proof would probably this proof would go outside the scope of what was done in this course. I don't know, but maybe I will try. Is it all right?
Easy perspective on that.
Huh?
Go ahead.
This is the last thing, right? I mean, so it doesn't matter, I think. So So let me just sketch the proof. So let S be over all k greater than 0 V k lambda G tensor V k pi dual of H. Okay, consider S, it's a ring. Then the spec of S, the Grothendieck spec of S is normal, that is singularities are normal and rational and has rational singularities. Okay. So, why is that the case? So, first of all, let us see, like for example, if you take k greater than or equal to 0, V k lambda g, yeah. So, then notice that this is the homogeneous coordinate ring of so if you look at this V lambda g, so representation V lambda g, okay. So, if you take the highest weight vector in that, so let us call this small v lambda highest weight vector, then you take the projective space, projectivization of p v lambda g. So, in that case, if you take the orbit of g of v lambda, okay, so that orbit is closed, right, that is a standard thing, because this orbit g v lambda is equal to g mod the stabilizer of v lambda inside g, which is parabolic. So, it is g mod p lambda, and since it is parabolic, this is closed. Then this is precisely the homogeneous coordinate ring of this, that is actually just the Borel-Weil theorem, right. So, and then there is a result of Kempf, which says that this homogeneous coordinate ring, that this variety actually, so meaning if you take the cone, this is a projective variety, if you take its cone, then the singularity of the origin of that cone, that singularity is rational, that is Kempf's result. So, the spec of this is normal and has rational singularities, and this same proof can be generalized to this also in similar way. So, we know that this spec is normal and has rational singularities. So, let T be the subring of H invariants inside. Okay. So, these H invariants would be summation k greater than or 0, it would be V k lambda g tensor V k pi star H, and you take the H invariants inside that, right. So, by Schur's lemma, we know that the dimension of this, so let us call this, so the dimension of, so let us call this whatever Tk, okay. So, let us call this summation k greater than or equal to 0 capital Tk. Then by Schur's lemma, dimension of Tk by Schur is just the multiplicity of V k pi h inside that, considered as an H module, correct, by Schur's lemma, and that multiplicity is precisely the Plaithism constant, right, the stretch plate. So, this is multiplicity of V k pi h in V k lambda g as H module by Schur's lemma, okay, which is precisely that A pi lambda mu k, right. So, which means that the Hilbert function of T, which is just defined to be just this dimension of Tk, right. So, this Hilbert function Htk, which is defined to be dimension of Tk, is nothing but just our polynomial, right, our function A pi lambda mu k, right. But now, this is the crux of the proof. We know that this is normal and has rational singularities, and this actually is the quotient of this by under H. Okay, so this is actually this is the variety or the spec obtained by taking quotients in the geometric invariant theory thing. It's the quotient of S under H, and then the Butow's central result says Butow's central result says that if you take a variety that is normal and has rational singularities and quotient it under reductive group action, then you again get the new quotient variety again is normal and has rational singularity. Okay. So, by Butow you know that spec T itself is normal and rational, that is singularities are rational. Okay. Then there is a general result of Flener. So, the Hilbert function of any variety in general is a asymptotically a quasi polynomial. Okay. That is the standard result of classical result of Hilbert. But what Flener shows is that if that variety is normal and singularities are rational, then the Hilbert function is not asymptotically quasi polynomial, but in fact a quasi polynomial right from the beginning. Okay. So, in that case, so by Flener then it follows that since the Hilbert function of this is just this, it follows that then this is actually a quasi polynomial, not just asymptotic quasi polynomial. Okay. So, that then shows that this stretching function associated with Plaithism constant is actually a quasi polynomial. Yeah. A priori it is not at all obvious why that function in fact have any such periodicity or polynomial properties, but is it clear what I was? Yeah. So, now since it is a quasi polynomial, you can ask whether this quasi polynomial has saturation properties, right, as for the Littlewood-Richardson coefficient. So, we will say that a quasi polynomial is saturated. So, just the definition. We say that Fk is saturated if for all I, if ik is greater than 0 for every k greater than or equal to 1 such that k equal to a mod L, if ik is not identically 0. So, if for any I, if fik as a polynomial is not identically 0, then fik is greater than 0 for every k with the residue class I. Yeah. So, in that case, if fk were polynomial, then this is precisely what the saturated polynomial, that is what in Knudsen-Tao theorem says the polynomial is saturated. Yeah. So, now the question is a polynomial a tilde pi lambda mu k saturated? Well, unfortunately, the answer turns out to be no. There are some counter examples that this polynomial need not be saturated, but this holds in some conjecture is that this holds in some relaxed sense. So, we will give a relaxation of this definition. So, we say that the saturation index SF of a quasi polynomial it's fairly complicated. I mean, it was found by not me, but some other people using computer experiments. So, it's fairly complicated. Yeah. The saturation index XF of a quasi polynomial Fk is the smallest integer with some additional properties which I will forget here, such that Fk plus SF is saturated. So, you just shift it little bit until it becomes saturated. Yeah. So, if the polynomial were really saturated, the saturation index would be 0. That would be ideal, but it need not be 0. In general, it could be large, but the conjecture is, so this is the Plaithism SH hypothesis, saturation hypothesis, GCT6. This conjecture says that the saturation index of this A tilde pi lambda mu k is small, is polynomial in the bit length of lambda mu y. Okay, is small, not 0. It need not be 0. Again, it gives an evidence if the original conjectures in complexity theory are true, then such a thing should be true. Okay, it gives an evidence why the saturation index should be small, though it need not be saturated in general. And then the theorem says and there is also a polyhedral version of this plathism, conjectural polyhedral version. So, plathism FH is positivity hypothesis. So, just like for Littlewood-Richardson coefficient, there is a polyhedral version of the Littlewood-Richardson coefficient. The conjecture is that there is a similar polyhedral Sharpe formula for plathism constants. So, that is plathism positivity hypothesis PH. This says that there exists a polytope, explicit polytope P pi lambda mu parameterized polytopes. There exists explicit parameterized polytopes K. Explicit means the membership problem can be done in polynomial time, okay, as before, such that A pi lambda mu k is the number of integer points inside this Y, just like in the Littlewood-Richardson case. Yeah. So, there is a set of polytopes such that this plathism constant is just the number of integer points inside that. So, this is the polyhedral version of the Littlewood-Richardson case. So, this is the first hypothesis. Again, it gives evidence why if the original conjectures in complexity theory are true, then this should be true. And moreover, that polytope, this function, though it need not be saturated, its saturation index is small. Yeah. So, these are the two positivity hypotheses, and with that the theorem is that assuming plathism pH and given lambda mu pi and some k prime greater than the saturation index, which is small, of A tilde pi lambda mu k, whether A k prime pi k lambda mu is non-zero can be decided in polynomial in lambda pi mu bit length of k prime time. Well, ideally we should have liked it k prime equal to 1 here, okay, yeah, but that we can't prove, but as long as k prime is larger than the saturation index, whether that plathism constant is non-negative, is non-vanishing, can be decided in polynomial time, assuming the plathism pH. Yeah. So, this is based on some complexity theoretic results in GCT, it's called saturated integer programming. We won't have time to go into this, but basically it says that what is true for Littlewood-Richardson story holds true even here with some slight relaxation. That is, if you have the polyhedral rule and you have the saturation property, then you can actually decide non-vanishing also in polynomial time. Of course, the main thing here is, and the main questions is, how to prove this plathism pH and SH. And that of course we are not going to go through, but as we said, for this Plathesian pH, GCT just suggests some approach to non-standard quantum group. But maybe this some other time, okay, not today. We won't talk about that today. So I think.
No, but so both are open?
Oh yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of work to be done. At the end of it, we will say that we don't understand representation theory. Okay, I mean, when we understand this, then we can say that only when we can actually solve these problems. Okay, only then we can really say that from a complexity theorist point of view that we understand representation theory. As of today, we have the building blocks, we have some techniques, but the main problems are not solved. And these are the kinds of problems which need to be solved on the way to the P versus NP problem. I mean, I think that is some fairly incredible story in the sense that at the top of it you would see no connection between P versus NP and all these fundamental problems in representation theory and algebraic geometry and so forth. But GCT program has connected all these, you know, I mean, these two worlds of mathematics and complexity theory in a very intimate way. I mean, and the connection is not to some peripheral problems of representation theory and algebraic geometry. Algebraic geometry we didn't go into here, but like representation theory, you can see that the connection is to the heart of representation theory. I mean, this is really the problem of representation theory which even mathematicians would want to solve. And GCT program says that if the original conjectures are true, then actually the problems that mathematicians want to solve actually have good solutions, which are good from both mathematicians' point of view and complexity theory's point of view. And furthermore, in this program, these hard problems at the heart of representation theory and algebraic geometry would have to be solved before the P versus NP conjecture can be resolved. So though we didn't go into the GCT program, at least I tried to give you some problem which lies at the heart of it and also at the heart of representation theory. So hopefully that should give some glimpse into what this program is about. So again, thank you very much for giving me a chance to talk here. So let me stop here. Yeah.